As Martha said, I'm Ryan Griffith. Uh, she mentioned about these webinar Wednesdays, and I am very interested in vehicles. That's one of my passions, cars. And then I also like technology. And so those two kind of go together to make electric vehicles. So I'm interested in that and that topic, this topic. And I got to work on a project here at the center with EVs. And so got a lot of information I'd like to share with you. I'm going to give you a whole lot of information this morning. And like they say, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It'll be a lot, but if you've got any questions, we're all friends. Just chime in if you unmute yourself if you want, or put it in the chat and ask your question. I don't mind as we go along. So we'll get started right away. I'm going to be talking about EVs, buying EVs, charging stations, revenue from EVs, just a variety of topics related to EVs. So we'll get started. All right, we're going to do our first poll. I want to know what you all know about EVs before I get started, so I'll know if I've got any other experts who know more than me. Are we? All right, here we go. So the last one, there's a couple of you who said you're pretty, you know your EVs pretty well, you know, but for those of you who don't know Elon Musk, he just happens to be the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX. So he's CEO of the most well-known electric car company and also of the spaceship building company. If you want to ride to space, you can give his company $55 million, you can get a ride to space. And he also happens to be the richest person on the planet. As of yesterday, he and I combined were worth $234 billion. Just a little bit of trivia for you. Him making up the most of that, all of that pretty much. So just throw a question out there and unmute yourself if you don't mind, or put it in the chat. I just wondered, when you hear EVs, what kind of concerns do you have? What do you think of? Is there anything that worries you about them as we adopt them, as you see more and more on the road before you buy one? What are your concerns? What do you think of? Just anybody. And maybe you don't have any concerns. Maybe we're good.
Range.
Okay, good.
Range, I heard Paul say.
Yeah,
Range.
the same. Getting somewhere and not being able to charge.
Yep. And that's one of the biggies everybody says, range anxiety.
Charging stations, taxes.
Yeah.
Longevity.
How long that they'll last. Yeah, that's good.
Battery disposal.
That's a real good one.
Here's Will mentioned lanes full of dead cars after stuck in rush hour traffic.
And there's that. Hopefully not. But
And if the vehicle's not making noise, what does that do for a pedestrian that might be visually impaired?
Right. I think that was John Callahan. That's a good one. And Toyota went to something a few years back where theirs would make some type of noise when they were, at a crosswalk when you're going real slow or something like that. So all good concerns. And hopefully I believe I'm going to hit about all of those, except maybe the battery disposal. And I have not done a lot of research on that because we're early in adoption. So we really haven't got to that point we got a lot of batteries that we got to do something with. But in my mind, I think that we recycle a lot of things and we recycle batteries now. So I'm hoping that gets developed as we move along in this process. But okay, so let's get started. Let me see. What is an EV? An EV is basically a vehicle that uses electricity to provide power for propulsion. What we all think of when we think of cars generally for the last 100 years has been an internal combustion engine car. So basically, for short, an ICE. You have a gasoline motor that powers your car, and that's the way you move. And I'll mention there's one other technology that's kind of getting started right now. It's not getting a lot of traction, and it's hydrogen cell. And you may or may not have heard of that, but that basically uses hydrogen for power for propulsion of your car. You probably haven't heard of it much because California is about the only place that you can get this. They have stations out there that provide hydrogen for the cars. And the plus to those is the byproduct is water. So that is a very big plus. The negative is hydrogen's hard to mine and get it. It's under very high pressure and it's very hard to produce, mass produce for cars. So it's not getting near as much attention now as EVs. And let's get started. And we'll talk about why EVs are getting all the attention they're getting. So let's talk about the types of EVs. The first type of EV is a hybrid electric vehicle. These are the ones that have been on the road the longest that you have seen. You see them every day. If you drove today or was out today, you saw one. You may own one. They're basically a self-contained system. They have a gasoline motor and they have electric motor. They have a battery and they have a gas tank. And those two work together. And it's a self-contained system. And the most popular one is a Prius. And I just happen to own a Prius, and I've owned one for 10 years. And I remember when I got it, I took it home to show it to my dad, and he said, "Where's the plug-in for it?" And I said, "Dad, there's no plug-in. You just put gasoline like you do anything else, and you put it in any other car, and you put it in drive, and you just go." And he said, and the first thing you think of is, well, how's the battery recharge if you don't plug it in? Well, those use the gasoline motor as it runs to charge the battery. And then as you brake, there's a system that gathers the energy from that and recharges your battery. So it's all self-contained, no worry about plugging that in. The downside to that is it's a small battery. Like my Prius, if I tried to drive it on battery only, and I can do that as long as you don't accelerate real hard, I can go maybe 1 mile before the gasoline motor would kick in and have to charge that battery back up. So not a long distance. These hybrids or these electric vehicles try to work and just ease the load on the gasoline motor. If you're cruising down the interstate or cruising down the highway, they'll use the electric motor and maybe turn the gasoline off, or when you're stopped at a stoplight or you're accelerating gradually, you'll just be using your electric motor. So that helps save gasoline, and you'll see those get anywhere from 40 to 50 miles per gallon. The next type is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And as you probably can guess, this one plugs in. Actually, you plug it into the wall. It has different battery technology that allows it to have a larger battery so you can go more miles on that battery. If the battery goes dead, though, it'll function just like a normal hybrid electric vehicle. The gasoline motor will charge the battery and it'll run just identical. The thought on these was, if you had a short commute, you could maybe get by with never using your gasoline motor, because these plug-in electrics will go anywhere from 11 to 50 miles on battery only. So, if you had a short commute of 15 miles, you could make it to work, maybe charge at work even, and then drive back and never use your gasoline motor. Now that's all dependent on certain things. Hybrids will use the gasoline motor if you accelerate really hard, no matter what. No matter if you had a fully charged battery on one of these plug-ins, if you tried to take off really hard, it would use the gasoline motor. Some other things about hybrid cars that you need to know about as far as battery life. Excuse me a second. The battery lasts the longest and does the best in moderate weather, spring and fall. If the temperature is about 60 degrees, you're going to get a lot more distance out of your battery. If there's no rain, believe it or not, rain causes friction and uses a little bit of battery, not a lot, but you will notice a little when it's raining if you watch it very closely. And if you drive them about 40 or 50 miles an hour, perfect. So if you're in the spring, it's sunny, about 60 degrees, and you're driving about 45, 50, you're going to go the furthest on your battery. Just a little hybrid information for you. And then the last EV, and this last one is the one that is going to be the game changer. It's the battery electric vehicles. So you have an electric motor and you have a battery, and that is what makes the car go. If the battery dies, it'll be like someone mentioned, you'll be sitting on the road in rush hour and everybody will be stopped. If they don't have battery charge, they will not go. There's no backup, if you will. So what is the big deal about EVs? Why are they getting attention now? Well, number one, we're becoming more environmentally friendly, and these cars are more environmentally friendly. They're not a small power plant in themselves burning fossil fuel and putting smog into the air. Yes, the way they get their power is probably by a fossil fuel plant that is providing electricity. However, the intent is to have them use renewable resources. Hopefully we get to that, either using solar, wind, or maybe hydro to generate power to use for these vehicles. Not to mention they do regenerate power, like I said, when they're braking. So obviously they don't have an ICE motor in them, so they're not going to generate any power for the battery that way. But when you decel or use the brakes, that you will generate some power for the batteries. Second thing, the big deal about EVs, there's less maintenance cost. Number one, the battery electric vehicles don't have a ICE motor in them. So you don't have a motor, you don't have a transmission, there's less moving parts. Think about if you've ever had your car worked on, if you had engine problems or transmission problems, you're going to be out probably significant dollars. We're talking 4 digits, thousands of dollars to repair one of those. Well, you don't have those in a EV, so nothing to worry about. You don't change the oil, none of that. So another thing, you heard me talking about the brakes. I've owned that Prius for 10 years and I didn't change the front brake pads until 140,000 miles. And I've got 165,000 on it now. And it's just now needing back brakes. If you, in a hybrid vehicle, if you brake slowly, it uses the regenerating system for the battery to slow you down. It doesn't ever squeeze the pads against the rotor, so you don't wear your brakes out. So
That is crazy.
Yeah, it's a true story. I just put, like I say, I hadn't even put back brakes and I've had the car for 10 years and it's got 165,000 miles on it. So
That's amazing.
I know. And then the technology on batteries and charging those batteries is, the advancements are just going gangbusters right now. There's a law as far as Moore's law with computers, that the transistors on a chip will double every 18 months or 2 years, something like that. That's about the way batteries are right now. They're just jumping the technology with them. I looked in 2010, well, you measure the capacity of a battery by kilowatt hours. The cost of a kilowatt hour for a battery in 2010 was $1,200. In 2020, it's $137 a kilowatt. So it's dropped about 90% the cost of batteries, which is a very large part of EVs. So they're starting to come down where they're affordable for the everyday person. They're not like Tesla. All of them are priced like Teslas. So I want to see if you can guess what the market share of EVs in the USA is right now. Well, the correct answer is 4%. So 1 in 25 today are electric vehicles. Now that could be a hybrid, that could be all electric. I mean, they're a hybrid electric, or they could be all electric. So 1 in 25, but US is trailing. England, Germany, France, they're all hovering around 10% right now, the latest thing that I saw. But I don't think anyone would guess, unless they've recently read it, who is the leader in EV sales. And that is Norway. Norway has sales of about 75% of their vehicles are EVs right now. That is amazing. And if you will recall what I said a couple of slides ago, EVs like moderate temperatures and weather, and Norway is not known. I don't know. I didn't look up their climate, but I think of them as cold, and I believe that is correct. They're more of a colder climate. So you wouldn't think that EVs would evolve there first. So how did they do it? And did I mention that in 2013 they only had less than 10%? Now they're at 75. So they have made this jump here in the last 9 years. So how did they do it? Well, their government committed to EVs. They said that we're gonna be environmentally friendly. We're gonna go to EVs, and the way you do that, of course, most of us all of us know, is by price. They started taxing the ICE vehicles, the internal combustion engine vehicles, and they started giving subsidies for EVs. So the EVs were cheaper, and the general public's going to go with the cheaper car. And of course, their electricity is cheap too. And I read the article, said it was cheap, and they told me the price, but then it's like 17 cents a kilowatt in the United States is actually cheaper than them. I think the average cost in the United States might be about 13 cents for the whole United States. So we have cheaper electricity than actually Norway does. But however, theirs is cleaner. It said that, the article I read said 67% of their power is hydro. So they're much more environmentally friendly in that respect than we are.
Yeah, one comment in the chat, Colin Morin says Norway uses oil sales to subsidize alternate energies.
So they sell it to us so we all can pollute, and then it makes them look better. Is that kind of what you were saying? What you're saying there? I didn't realize that. Okay.
Keith, you have one more. Keith House said, my main contact with EV owners in Kentucky District 1 is cross-country travelers calling to ask about charging station locations. Yep, that is huge. And I'll get on that here in just a second, charging stations and locations and how we develop that infrastructure so that people don't have that range anxiety, and they know when they go on a trip, they'll be able to get charged and not have to wait hours for it. So let's see. So
Another reason EVs are getting a lot of attention, the bill that was recently passed by the president and Congress, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, had a goal of 500,000 nationwide chargers by 2030. So there is a commitment now to build chargers and to get this network up. And if you'll look at the next 3 bullet points, I won't read those to you, but I will point out the numbers in those: 7.7, 12.3, and 10.3 billion. So we're add those together, that's about $30 billion. That gets attention. People are going to be interested when they see those numbers like that in developing the infrastructure, building the charging stations, buying the vehicles. So that is going to make the adoption rate of EVs go up. Manufacturers are committing to EVs now. That money, and that's what the United States is, the president has committed to. So manufacturers are committing to it. Tesla was the first, sort of, and others are coming now, but I say sort of. Over 100 years ago, Henry Ford's wife had a Detroit Electric, and that was her favorite car. Her husband was developing the assembly line in the Model T and changing humankind with his invention, but she didn't like it. She liked her electric vehicle. They were cleaner and safer at that time, because the ICE motors were just, or the internal combustion motors were just getting developed. And so they were a little dangerous. So she liked her electric vehicle. She's going to stick with that. And the batteries weighed a ton, literally. And there was no development in the battery technology at that time when you could get gasoline, I think it was about 15 cents, 20 cents at that time. There wasn't anybody really interested in developing any other types of vehicles when you could get fuel that cheap. So I'll give you a little bit of trivia about Tesla. Now, the 2 people who know Elon Musk know this, so I'm not going to be telling them anything, but Tesla's newest model out is the Model S Plaid. And the reason it is called the Plaid, if you didn't know this, if you're a movie buff, if you've ever watched Spaceballs, I'll have you recall that's the parody of Star Wars that came out in the 80s. They had a spaceship in there, and when it would go really fast, it would go in ludicrous mode, and all you could see was plaid. So if you get a Tesla, one of these new Tesla S Plaids, you can put it in ludicrous mode and go really fast. So just a little trivia for you. But that Plaid model has a range of 396 miles, which, that sounds really good. It can go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, and it pulls a max G of 1.2 Gs when it's taking off. And it'll cost you only $131,000. So, if you got an extra $131,000, you might want to check into that.
You got one more response in the chat box from Paul Looney. Says at least 2 states are piloting inductive charging in motion: Michigan with Ford and Indiana with Freightliner.
That's a good point, Paul. I don't know a lot about that induction charging, but what I do know about it and what Paul's talking about, you're driving down the road, they're going to make like a mile or maybe a half mile. I really don't know the length, but as you're driving, you can be moving and it charges you. And so I don't know many details on that, but that is very intriguing right there. You get that, and that's definitely a game changer right there. Other manufacturers that are committed to EVs, Ford is saying they're going to have 40% of their sales EV by 2030. GM is pledging all new vehicles generate 0 emissions by 2035. Lexus is saying 100% by 2030, Honda by 2040, and Volvo is the most aggressive. They're saying 100% by 2025. Folks, that's only 3 years away. I don't know. I've got my doubts on that, but they say they're going to do it. So we'll see. If the infrastructure is there, they might be successful. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but infrastructure is the key to all this, being able to charge your vehicle. Electric vehicles are causing other manufacturers to begin making cars that you've never heard of. This is a Rivian truck. It just won Motor Trend Truck of the Year. And the good thing about having these new automakers spring up is they think outside the box. They've not been making cars for 100 years and know this is the way we've always done it. The trunk's always in the back, the front's always got the motor, and this is just the way we build them. Because and this is not unique to this Rivian truck, but when you don't have a motor here in the front, you have a frunk. Then that is a trunk in the front. So they do things differently. This truck, and can they see my cursor? Can you see my cursor on the screen? Okay, well, right here, in trucks, if you've ever owned a truck or ridden in a truck, hauled something in a truck, typically in the front of the bed, between the cab and the bed, there's some space there that's just kind of unused. In this truck, this door opens and it's a compartment, a waterproof compartment that goes the full width of the truck where you can put stuff. Everybody's got stuff that they want to keep dry in a truck. And so they said, this is wasted space. We'll put it there. Nobody's ever thought of that in 100 years. Nobody's put that there. And so this new manufacturer said, hey, let's try this. Now, and since I've got this drawing up and I can point to it with my cursor, if you're curious, the battery on most vehicles, electric vehicles, is underneath where you ride, underneath the passenger compartment. They're usually right here. And the advantage, the advantage to that is they're heavy, as that batteries are very heavy and they're low in the car. So that makes the center of gravity low. So that's a good thing that they have electric vehicles. Also the motors. Typically, if you've saw Tesla and paid any attention to them, you might see a decal on the back that says dual motors. When you see dual motors, that usually means it's all-wheel drive. The way electric vehicles are, there'll be a motor for the back. There may be even some of the exotic cars like the Porsche. I think they put a motor on each wheel. They make a hybrid that has a electric motor on each wheel. So, you got a lot of power, but generally in the vehicles, you'll see they'll have one motor in the back or the front. And then if you pay a little bit more for a more expensive model, you'll get a dual motor and you'll have all-wheel drive vehicle. So,
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah.
This is Jeff. I had something that you talking about the weight in the bottom of the truck.
Yeah.
I'm on some roadside safety stuff nationally. And if most folks know about the MASH testing of our guardrail, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the weight of that battery totally changes the dynamic of the crash. So the roadside safety researchers are trying to figure that out. What do they need to do to crash into guardrail end treatments, crash cushions? Totally changes the weight distribution. And we don't know, the industry don't know what we're going to do yet. I'll just throw that in there for a little extra added value.
Yeah. Jeff's talking about the standard. We have all these guardrail end treatments and guardrail on the road, and they test those to a standard. And right now they test heavy trucks and a pickup truck and maybe a car that typically everyone drive. And like Jeff's saying, the weight of those is like distributed right here in the front, wherever your motor is. And so now the weight's going to be down here. So it's going to change all the dynamics. And that's a good point. I suggest they don't go buy $131,000 Tesla just to crash it. Maybe they retrofit some of the ones they have, but plus I would hate to see a new Tesla crashed. And then here is another new manufacturer that just came out, Lucid Air. This is the Motor Trend Car of the Year. So a new manufacturer got the Truck of the Year and the Car of the Year with Motor Trend. So, and this one, as of now, I don't think anyone is ahead of them. This is the mileage champ for now. It gets 516 miles on a charge and will only cost you $139,000. So if you don't like the Plaid and you want to go with a different manufacturer and you got $130,000 laying around, here you go. So let's talk about buying EVs. Okay.
I think I got one more comment in the chat.
Okay.
It says, Conley says, if the battery can't be replaced, the car will be junk from consumer standpoint.
Usually now my experience with this is mainly with Prii, because I have one and I've read a lot about them. Usually a cell will go bad and you have a cell replaced. And in the Prii, I can't remember how many cells they have, maybe 40 or 50, I think. And it's not terribly expensive. So that's what I envision that would happen. And some of these Prii are going over 200,000 miles. So
the Prii, if I can interject, is a very unique animal in that it is designed to replace the batteries. And if you would check on a lithium ion replacement, you get greater range at a more economical price. But the total battery ones are being designed where the battery is integral to the structure of the car, and therefore they don't want you to replace the battery. So that's
very
something
good
to
point.
consider.
Very good point. That is right. I have read that too, that it's structurally, it provides the structure for the car, just like the gentleman said. Who was that was speaking?
This is Conley.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's very good. That is correct. So maybe so. I would like to think that they're going to come up with ways to repair those batteries, though, the same as you could replace one in a pre-I, but maybe not. That's definitely a concern for sure. You don't want to buy a vehicle that, if the battery goes bad, you just got to throw it away and you got to start all over. So, all right. Let's say you're going out to buy an EV. What are you looking for? And when you're buying that electric vehicle, let's compare it first to the ICE vehicles. More than likely, you're going to be looking at price. You're going to find a vehicle in your price point, what you want. Right now, EVs, the cheapest one on the market is a hybrid. You can get pre-I and other things cheap. A pure electric vehicle, I think probably the Bolt by Chevrolet is probably the cheapest. I did not check this. It's just as from my knowledge. I think the Bolt's probably the cheapest all electric. But typically generally they're in the $50,000 to $60,000 range, not the Bolt. The Bolt may be around 30, I think, to start, but ICE, you're looking at your price. You're going to probably look at maybe miles per gallon. If you're a commuter and you got to drive, you might want to know how many miles per gallon you're getting possibly. And you might look at performance. Maybe if you want to go fast like that Plaid model Tesla, if you want to go 0 to 60 really fast, you might want to look at performance. I will say the thing about performance in EVs, generally the performance of all EVs is really good taking off. In a ICE vehicle, you got an engine that's got to build up torque and power, and as the RPMs go up, that's when that starts building up. With an electric vehicle, it's instantaneous. It's off or on. When you push the pedal down, all the way down, you have full power and torque immediately. So generally, when you buy an EV, they're going to be really fast off the line, if you will, 0 to 60. That's what they do very, very well. So when you're going to buy electric vehicles, like I said, price, looking at price point, that's coming down every day because batteries make up a big portion of that price, and that battery price is coming down, and there's more people coming to the market. So I think we're going to see these get into the prices that people can actually afford. Rebates. There's also, I should mention that, there's tax credits. $7,500 on most EVs, and they are tax credits. You have to make, I'm not a tax expert, but you have to have a tax bill of $7,500 before you could get the $7,500 off. If you only owed $5,000 in taxes for the year, that's all you would get for your EV. But it starts out at $7,500. I think the number's 200,000, and then it goes in half, and then it goes down gradually then on dates, and it goes away eventually. So Chevrolet doesn't have any more. You can't get a rebate on them. Teslas have went away. They've sold enough and the time has passed, so you can't get anything on those. But I will say, if you want that Lucid Air for $139,000, you would get the $7,500 off. So it would only cost you about $131,000, just saying, and there are discussions to up that tax credit to $12,000. I don't know how real it is, but that has been thrown out there. And I think if we're going to get people to buy these EVs in any numbers, not only is the infrastructure for charging going to have to be there, but the price is going to have to get better. Battery capacity and range. If we're going to have cars that we can use, we're going to have the capacity where they can go a distance that we use them, like 200, 300 miles is what we think of, because that's generally what you get on a tank of gas. And right now there's 20 plus cars on the market that have a 200 plus mile range. So we're getting there. I read somewhere or saw that motorists, generally 75% of motorists travel 50 miles or less per day, and 95% of motorists travel 100 miles or less per day. So if you can get a vehicle with 200 miles range or 300, you're going to be good for 2 or 3 days, and then you can charge it daily and you'll be fine. So, and I'll talk about charging stations and things like that, and give you an idea how quickly you could get those 50 or 100 miles you may drive in a day, how quickly you can charge that back. And then the last thing is onboard charger. When you buy an EV, they have options on them like regular ICE cars, but one of the options is an onboard charger. And so when you're charging your car, you don't really care when you're filling up your ICE vehicle with your gas nozzle. You don't care how big the hose is. It's going to take you a minute or two to fill it up, so it doesn't really matter. But on EVs, how big that charger is, how quickly you can get that charge in your car is important. And you can upsize your onboard charger. I saw one that was like $800 to double the capacity, how quickly it charges the car. So there's things, that's what you look for when you're buying electric vehicles. So charging stations, there's 3 levels. Number 1 is the standard 120 volt outlets. They're everywhere. They're what's in your house, probably what's right beside you right now. That you could charge your car, your EV, on that charger. The only thing is you're only going to get about 4 miles added to the battery per hour of charge. So if you charged it for 3 hours, you would get about 12 miles. Not many people are going to be able to use that. The only thing that I feel like that's going to be useful for is if you drive to work and you know you've got plenty of miles, but just so you don't have range anxiety, you're going to work for 8 hours and you got an outlet available, you might plug it in and gain yourself 32 miles for the day. Or you might go visit grandma and you go down there at 10 in the morning and you have lunch with her and you spend the afternoon with her, and you might charge it up while you're visiting with her for 6 or 8 hours and just gain you a few miles so that you don't have that range anxiety when you get back. But level 1 is not going to be an option for most people. Level 2, though, that's the 240 volts. That's like a dryer. If you've got a dryer in your home, it's the same concept. You can have these installed in your home for, I put 1,000. If you're good with electricity, you could probably get it for 500, install it yourself. It really depends on how far away your garage is from your box, your electric box, because the wire that you have to install is very expensive. Now, these are in homes. People have them installed in their homes. I will guarantee you, if people own a Tesla, more than likely they have already installed a level 2 at their home. But these are also commercial. If you went to hotels and seen chargers there, I work at UK, and down there near the parking office, there's a charger there that has level 2 charging, but you can gain about 25 miles per hour of charge. So think about this. If you drove it home and you got home at 6 o'clock in the night, you put it on the charger, and then the next morning at 6 a.m., it's charged for 12 hours. So you've gained about 300 hours. So, this is what most people that have access to a garage or some way to charge it are going to use. The only thing is, you get into people who live in apartments and things like that, who don't have a garage or access to anything like this. They're going to have these level 2 chargers either at work or at the mall or someplace they visit and are going to be for a significant amount of time. And then the holy grail, and this is the one that's going to have to be developed if we're going to be driving these EVs across country. If you're going to take them on vacation to Florida or whatever, and they are the level 3, they're the 480 volts. They're commercial only. You won't have one of these at your house. They have to have a substation installed beside of them. They require so much electricity. So these are the one, and they cost $150,000 to $200,000. These are the ones that Tesla, when you hear of a Tesla supercharger station, and Tesla done a great job. Not only did they develop their vehicle, but they developed their charging network throughout the United States. So you can pretty much stay on the interstate. And if you drive the interstate across the country, they're going to have a charging station for you. I test drove one of these in Washington, D.C., and the salesperson said, "Where do you live?" And so she put in my address, and it showed me how to get from Washington, D.C. to my house, where I had to stop to charge, how long I would be there charging, and then what time I would arrive at home after I stopped at all these spots and charged, and how much charge I would have when I got home. So it was pretty neat. But the development of these DC fast chargers are a big part of making EVs mainstream.
You got one comment. Tammy Milburn says Tesla has many charging stations at Myers.
Yes, that is where they installed a lot of I guess they got a deal with Myers and they put a lot of their superchargers there. And I haven't been to one in a while, but I've never paid attention and looked for I've lost my word. I said it just a second ago, the power plant for that supercharger. I never looked. There has to be one sitting around there because you can't just wire them right in. They have to have a substation. That's what I'm trying to think of. So yes. And there are various ones in Kentucky, and I'm going to tell you where they are right now in just a second. I think I got another poll here. I got to get going. How many public level 2 chargers are there in Kentucky today? What do you think? So Nicole, if you open that up real quick.
While everyone's voting, Tammy also said they need charging station at rest areas. That's a good idea.
Yes.
And I know that where you can rent a car for a day or a week or whatever in populated areas, they do have like charging stations at some of those locations too.
Okay. 14 out of 18 voted, and the correct answer is in the poll. I'll show you all the results. The correct answer is there are 191 stations in Kentucky today. And there at these 191 stations, there are 406 ports. So like a gas pump, there's 406 places you could plug your electric vehicle in at those 191 stations. And a lot of them are privatized right now. They're like Electrify America, Charge Point, things like that. And they sell you time at their station to charge your car. And so they have apps. You can find them. You can find if somebody's using them, if they're open. One thing I was going to mention about what someone said about rest areas having charging stations, that is a very interesting point, and it makes a lot of sense. However, the power companies have got to get all this power to it. So if it is not close to one of their substructure or substations or something, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be very expensive to get it at those rest areas. So I don't know how that's going to develop through the U.S. It may work, it may not, but that's something that's got to be looked at before you can just install one. Okay, let's talk about the level 3. These the gold standard. How many of those do you think there are in the United States?
You got one more
Or in
comment.
Kentucky. I'm sorry, in Kentucky. I'm sorry.
You have one more comment in the chat from Arlene Lube. She says, I'm concerned about the health dangers of expanding 5G. Tesla said the same.
I don't know a lot about that. I know there's some concerns about that. The 5G, I don't have any comment because I don't know enough about that. So if you would open this poll, Nicole, and let's see what everybody thinks, how many fast chargers there are in Kentucky. The correct answer on that is there are 21. There are 21 DCFC fast chargers, DC fast chargers in Kentucky. There are 10 Tesla only. Out of those 21, 10 are Tesla only. You can't charge anything else but a Tesla at those. That's the ones like at Myers, the superchargers. And they have 82 plugs at those 10 Tesla chargers in Kentucky. The 11 other fast chargers in Kentucky have 23 plugs. So there's 23 DCFCs in Kentucky. 4 at Walmart. 4 Walmarts have them, 2 Harley-Davidson dealerships, 2 Nissan dealerships, 1 Mercedes-Benz, 1 Buick GMC, and there's 1 at the Corvette Museum. So if you're looking for one, that's where they are. Okay, so how much is it going to cost you to run this EV versus your internal combustion engine? Okay, the energy in a gallon of gasoline, someone's determined that equals 33.7 kilowatt hours. So in an internal combustion engine car, you're going miles per gallon. You want to know how many miles you can go on 1 gallon of gas, and you'll see on the sticker, it gets 20 miles to the gallon, let's say. On an EV, you will see MPGE. That's how many miles that EV will go on 33.7 kilowatt hours, or the equivalent of 1 gallon of gasoline. A Mach-E, a Mustang, that's the Ford Mustang Mach-E is their EV, and it gets 90 MPGE. A Tesla S Plaid that I mentioned earlier gets 116 miles per gallon E. So how does that compare? How much is it going to cost you to charge your car and use your EV compared to internal combustion? Let's say we buy that car that gets 20 miles per gallon. It takes 5 gallons to go 100 miles, right? 5 times 20 is 100. So 5 gallons of gas, it's slightly over 3, but I use 3 because it's easy. So it takes you 5 gallons to go 100 miles. You buy 3 gallons, you buy it at $3 a gallon. You've bought $15 worth to go 100 miles. So it costs you 15 cents a mile. On an EV, 33.7 kilowatts, we're going to assume it goes 100 miles per MPGE. So it's going to take an even 33.7 kilowatts to go that 100 miles. So in Kentucky, the average cost of a kilowatt hour power is 10 cents. So $3.37 to go 100 miles, or 0.034 cents per mile. Now that didn't take into, there is some charging. You lose a little bit when you're charging. They say about 10%. So this would still be under 4 cents a mile right now to drive an EV per mile in Kentucky. And that was a 20 mile per gallon car. That's compared to, say, a Prius, which I happen to own, which I happen to be a geek, and I tracked all the numbers when I drove it. And it cost me about 5.6 cents a mile to drive it, paying an average of $2.64 a gallon. So at $3 a gallon, it probably cost me about 6 cents a mile to drive that Prius and you're about 4 cents on the EV. So you're even cheaper than a Prius to drive one. So let's see. Okay, let's talk about road funding. I know a lot of the people in this room, in this presentation, know a lot about road funding. Some of you know more than I know, but we all know that motor vehicle usage tax is a portion of how we fund our roads and bridges in Kentucky. When you buy a new car, you pay 6% tax on it. That's not sales tax, that's motor vehicle usage tax. So that goes to roads and bridges. Another way that we fund our roads and bridges is motor fuel tax. So of these two, which one do you know that EVs pay? They pay the top one. When you buy it, you're going to pay that. Which one do they not have to pay? Motor fuel tax. You're not putting any fuel in it, so you're not paying any tax on it because you're not buying any fuel. So that's a kind of a big deal. These two right here comprise the majority of the funding for roads and bridges in Kentucky. Now, Martha mentioned earlier 3,500 EVs. I don't know if you all caught that, but she's exactly correct. There's 3,500 electric vehicles registered in the state of Kentucky right now, approximately. So that's not really a big deal. Those 3,500, if they were ICE vehicles, they wouldn't be buying a lot of fuel. So that's not a big dent right now. But as we grow this could be very significant. And if we grow as fast as Norway, it could get significant very, very quickly. So I don't know about you, sorry, the no revenue, but I don't know about you, but I like the roads and bridges that we have here in the United States. I like knowing when I get ready to go to work up here at UK that I can be there in about 12 minutes if traffic's not bad, about 20 minutes if traffic's bad. I know that the lights, no matter how bad traffic gets, I'm going to get my turn to go. The lights are going to change green for me eventually, and I'm going to get to go. I like that. When I go visit my parents down in southeastern Kentucky and I have to cross Green River, I like knowing that I'm not going to have to drive down the slope and find a low water crossing to get across. I can cross that bridge that I was involved in building about 30 years ago. It's nice. I can get across it in about 2 seconds, and I'm right there at my parents' house. So I don't mind if there's some kind of tax on these EVs, and there's going to have to be, because once we start all driving these vehicles, we're going to have to generate revenue somehow. And how are we going to do that? There's a couple of ways, or 3 ways that I know of. Possible replacements for user fees on EVs are registration fees, mileage user fees, or utility taxes. And I'm going to talk a little about each one of those so you can see the advantage or disadvantages, and you can tell your legislators how you want to go. Registration fee. Positives. This would be when you go renew your registration on your vehicle on your birthday, you'll pay a fixed amount, maybe $100, $200, something like that. You pay it. No privacy issues. You're paying your registration anyways. You just give them an extra $100 and you're done. This would be very good for high mileage drivers. If someone's driving 50,000 miles a year, that would be a lot of tax on the fuel they're using, but now they're just paying a flat fee. So not really bad on them. Low administrative costs. You're already paying your registration. You just add a little more, another $100 to it. Not a big deal. Negatives. If you got somebody that's on a fixed budget and that they're hit with their $100 or $200 right off the bat, they're not paying gradually at the pump. Every time they fill their car up, they're hit with that money all at once when they renew the registration on their car. Not good. Bad for low mileage drivers. Grandma, she doesn't drive but 2,000 miles a year, and she's going to have to pay $100. And I drive 50,000 miles a year, let's say, and I'm paying $100. That's not really fair. So that's the negatives of a registration fee for EVs. Mileage user fee. This obviously sounds like the fairest right off the bat, but there's positives and negatives. You pay for what you drive. So if you're going to drive 50,000 miles year, you're going to pay for each one of those. The number that you pay for each mile, that would have to be determined, but at least you pay for what you drive. There are potentially privacy issues. If you put a tracker on it, you got the little port on your car when they diagnose what's wrong with it. If you're having problems with it, you can also plug in something. If you've got teenagers, you've seen that. You plug it in, you can tell how fast it goes, how it accelerates, where it has GPS, where it goes. There are 2 types. You put a dumb tracker on it, and it would just report the mileage. That's good. You don't have any privacy issues, but you might be, let's say you put it on in here in Kentucky and you would drive to Florida. if you drove all those miles, you would be paying taxes to Kentucky and not to the states you actually drove in and used their roads. So that's a disadvantage to that. But you could put a smart tracker on it, and it would have GPS in it. It would know exactly where you drove those miles. So you would pay each state for how many miles you drove in their state. So that's an advantage to that. Negative, like I said, privacy issues. Somebody's going to know where you are. Now, there's people that argue they collect so much data. I mean, there's 4 million cars registered in Kentucky. And if you had all that mileage and all this where they were, nobody's going to be actively looking where Ryan Griffith went. However, they would have access if somebody wanted to look where Ryan Griffith went, they technically could. So there's that to consider. I talked about the mileage. At least if you had a smart tracker, you could pay the mileage in the state that you were driving in. Administrative costs. There has been discussion that this would be too great to overcome. It would be, monumental, tracking people's mileage, sending them a bill and all of that. I feel like that we probably could get to some system that would be automated that wouldn't be too bad. I will mention 2 states real quickly. I know I'm getting short on time. Utah has a system. It's $123 a year for your EV. You can pay it if you want, or you can pay 1.52 cents per mile. And then once you reach $123 in mileage, you stop. So you would think, well, why wouldn't I do the 1.52 cents per mile? But then you lose your privacy because they're tracking your mileage and stuff. So you may not be interested in, but Utah offers that. Oregon, they offer $153 at registration. They got a plan, or actually they collect 2 years. So you have to pay $306 every 2 years in Oregon. Or you can choose to pay 1.8 cents per mile. So that's some states that are kind of on the front edge of this mileage user fee. And I'm about done, I promise. The last option is a utility tax. And this basically would work kind of like we do now. We have gasoline stations that, we don't pay the tax. We just pay our gasoline when we buy it. They take care of all the tax. That's handled by not many, I don't know how many, 20 station owners that BP, Marathon, they pay the tax and it's taken care of. The same thing would be here. The utility companies, KU, would handle this. No real privacy issues on this, I wouldn't think, other than people would know how much power you're using. You'd pay for what you use. It'd be kind of like the mileage user fee. Whatever power you use and recharge, you would just pay for it. Low administrative costs. You're already getting an electric bill. It just would be based on how much you use. Now, the negatives to this, your energy bill may rise a little bit because they're having to deal with paying a tax that they weren't permitted. I'm talking about the electric companies. So they may charge a little extra. So that may increase. And there would need to be, the system would have to be developed because, you're getting power in your house right now. How do they know that you're using it to recharge your car? Most of them will tell you they know because the meter's spinning like you're just using all kinds of power, and they know they would be able to track it that way. There's also systems that your car will tell the system that you're plugged in or whatever. That would have to be developed, and that may cost a little bit more to be installed in homes. But this would be another system. At least you pay for what you get. You're not hit with a large upfront cost. So, and I'm done.